Good morning. Thank you, Cameron. Good morning. Peace and greetings and welcome and love and all good things to you, whether you're worshiping here in this place or by video now or at another time. It is, okay, we'll work on that, Penny. So driving here today, the sky is gorgeous. The trees are amazing. So I was like, let's just start worship today with some gratitude listing. And just popping out as you are moved, the things that are right and good and that you're thankful for in the world. Now, I know that not everything is perfect. We've got problems around us and within us and between us, but there's so much that is good and right in this world. So what are you thankful for this morning? You can just shout it out whenever you want. Charlotte Congregational Church. Amen. Our health. Hugs.
The red trees.
Red trees.
The golden trees.
Grandchildren. Your family, absolutely. Friends. Amen. Yeah. Cameron, yes. The choir. God, for everything that is good, for everything that is educational, for everything that's exactly where it needs to be, and even for those things in our lives that are out of place, that are nettling us forward. We pause this morning to give you thanks and praise, and we offer you our worship. Grace and peace. Amen. From gratitude to gratitude, I invite Rich Price forward to give us a little bit of a stewardship moment as we continue our 2024 stewardship campaign with a theme, Our Hands.
Thank you. Morning.
Good morning.
A little while ago, Francis asked if I would consider speaking in front of you on the topic of why our family chooses to support the church and on the topic of stewardship. I missed the part about our hands as the key theme. Should have read her email completely. I remember reading her email thinking, me, not me. Surely there's someone better to talk on this topic. And I did keep reading the email a little further, and the next sentence was, you're probably thinking, me, not me, surely there's someone better. Well played, Francis. She's not here, by the way. The problem is that she asked me a month ago, which was very considerate in that it gave me a lot of time to think about it, but it was problematic in that it gave me a lot of time to think about it. And when I think about topics that are so expansive like this, I need to apply some constraints because I tend to zig and I tend to certainly zag. So I thought, let me get elemental and let me share with you in the way that my brain works, which is through song. I'm not going to sing, but I wanted to share some thoughts through the lens of some of my favorite songs by my favorite band, the Beatles. It's a lengthy setup to a tenuous concept that may or may not work, but here goes. The long and winding road. When Kimberly and I lived in Los Angeles, this is before 5 kids, before Obama even, but when Donald Trump was just on an NBC show, we belonged to a church in Los Angeles, and it was my first glimpse of the power of a spiritual community, and it was very meaningful for us. But the long and winding road brought us to Vermont, and we tried a bunch of churches. And I won't throw any of them under the bus, but none of them felt like home. None of them drew us in. Which brings me to my next song, She's a Woman. In this case, I'm talking about Hadley Bunting. She is a woman, and she's someone that Kimberly and I and our family have grown to love very deeply and have felt drawn to for years. And Hadley said, why don't you come down, we live in Burlington, she said, why don't you come down to Charlotte, see what's going on at Charlotte Congregational. And we quickly discovered that any community that reserves such an important place for someone like Hadley would be a place that would be full of other incredible people, including Susan. I saw her standing there, or rather here, delivering such inspiring, thoughtful poetry, because I think Susan's prayers and reflections and sermons are poetry that I look forward to each week, that are as rich and thought-provoking as they are mellifluous. And Kevin, who leads with such warmth and welcome and grace that it makes me know that if I fell, he and this community would be there for me. Which brings me to my next song, If I Needed Someone. I think most of you know that our family suffered a shocking event on November 25th of last year when my nephew Hisham and 2 of his childhood friends were shot. All 3 of them were shot on our street, and it was after they'd attended the birthday party of our youngest boys. Hisham received the most serious injury, with a bullet passing through his thumb as he raised his hand defensively, and the bullet passed through his thumb and entered his collarbone and came to rest in his spine. And in those dizzying and distressing days that followed, Susan and Kevin and Hadley were quietly persistent in their love and support. And I remember in particular Susan walking the halls of the hospital and Kevin standing vigil in the ICU waiting room, there to pray, but there also to bring this congregation's love and support. Here comes the sun. I think some people wonder, what's the point of a church? In 2024, it seems to be an increasingly old-fashioned concept. But our family is reminded of our why on a regular basis. Here, there, and everywhere. This is a community of people that comes to the space, that chooses to come to this space, and that choice is worth noting when we think of other communities in our lives. School communities are important, but school is kind of what you do. And work, if we're lucky to have a sense of community, well, it's a secondary component of work. This is a community we choose. We come together by choice and with love and with hope and patience, and with a little help from our friends, we come to lift each other up. And I don't know any other place in my life that's like that and is quite as powerful as this. Which brings me to my final song. she loves you. And by she, I mean Kimberly, my wife. And by loves you, I mean loves you, all of you. The ones we know well, and the ones we know by name and by smile. The ones we've just met. The ones in the Christian Education Committee and the Beautification Committee. And the ones who become supportive confirmands to our kids and great friends and come to their volleyball games. The ones at Sunday school, the ones in the choir and behind the piano and running the live stream. And the ones that look around this room each week and sing, "May God's peace abide in you." You lift her up. And she's the most important person in my life. And so for that, I love you. And in the end, I probably should have spoken about hands in some way. But I'll finish by saying I wish we could give more to this church, and I know we will one day. And I know for now what we do financially and with our time, I trust that that's okay and that's enough. And I hope you'll join us. And I know that if my Beatles rambling made any sense, you feel the same way I do.
Susan and I agree it's time for the benediction. We can all go to coffee hour. Thank you, Rich. We do, as part of our campaign this year, Our Hands, we're inviting you to use your cameras that are on your pockets to send in pictures that you find throughout your week and your life of people using their hands in service to one another. And every week we'll show just a few pictures, and we have just a few now here for you. These were sent in by you this week. Claire Black concert last Sunday. Claudia a few weeks ago. Both benefit concerts. Her Sunday school making ornaments for Heifer International. Making dog treats and assembling toiletry bags. And warm clothing for new Americans that will be distributed today. And I just had to throw that one in. Look at that. That's Arthur's. Our hands in service and love. And as we light the candle of peace, we're reminded of our hands working for peace in so many ways. I invite you to rise in body or spirit. As we pray our opening prayer from John O'Donohue, called For Courage. And we say together, in our worship, God, may I find moments to close my eyes, gather all the kindling about my heart to create one spark. That's all I need to nourish the flame and cleanse the dark of its weight of festered fear. A new confidence will come alive to urge me toward higher ground, where my imagination will learn to engage difficulty at its most rewarding threshold. Our God, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Save us in the time of trial, and deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, now and forever. Amen. Our opening hymn is number 12. Please be seated.
And I invite all children and youth to come forward at this time. So you can sit where you'd like this morning. I'm going to read a story. There really aren't many pictures, I hate to say it. So you can look at me, and you can look at the pictures before I read it. This is a story about, a Bible story about a man named Job. And this is the artist's representation of Job and his family and friends. And so this is a story from the Bible that makes us wonder about times when we don't think God is there. We probably all have those times when we think, I don't know about this. Maybe God's not there. So this is a story called God Remembers Job. Sometimes things happen to us that we don't understand. They can be good or bad. It's really hard to understand when bad things happen to us. So a man named Job had always been faithful to God, even when he was sick and he lost everything. He still loved God. Job's wife even told him to give up on God, but Job refused. Then Job's friends came to visit him because they heard he was sick. All of Job's friends thought that he must have done something wrong. God was good. If bad things were happening to Job, it was because God was punishing him. Job's friends told him, God does bad things to bad people, and good things to good people. But Job knew that was not true. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. Job knew that this was not God's doing. Job knew that God was still with him, even though bad things were happening to him. But Job didn't understand why the bad things were happening to him, so he began to question God. And God listened to Job's questions. I know it has been hard for you, God said. But why do you question me? I am God. I have done many things that you don't know about. You cannot begin to understand what great things I have done. So Job began to see that God was still good and that God still loved him, even when things happened that he didn't understand. So the message of the story about Job is that God is still with us even when we're having a hard time. And we talk about that in Sunday school. When we share our joys and our concerns, we thank God for being with us in our joys and in our concerns. And so last night, there are several people here who served with me. Raise your hand if you will. So Grant, Anna, and Austin. Matilda's not here. Jim is here. Yeah, so we served at the Salvation Army downtown. And thankful for Jeannie's mac and cheese and Emily's coleslaw and I think Bernice and Jack and Barbara, if you're online. A bunch of people cooked, and we made a big fruit salad. We brought fruit, we brought coleslaw and mac and cheese, and we served hungry people who didn't have anywhere to eat. They might not have anywhere to sleep. And so I just wanted to invite people. Raise your hand again if you served at the Salvation Army. So would it be okay with you guys if people wanted to come and ask you about that experience during fellowship hour? You could just share a little bit about what that's like. Okay, great, thank you. So I just wanted to share this story of Job today because Kevin's going to preach about Job, and I want to clarify that God doesn't make bad things happen to people. God is with us when bad things happen to us. Amen. Let's go to Sunday school.
Good morning. So as we come to our time for prayer, I want to just right off the bat say thank you to the Albertson and Davis family for these flowers. Yesterday we had a funeral for Suzanne Davis's father, Stieg Albertson. Yesterday he was buried, and then we had a funeral for him, and they very sweetly left these bouquets for us this morning. So thanks to them, and also we hold them in our hearts as they mourn Stieg's passing. Are there other people for whom you would like prayers this morning?
Deirdre.
Peg. Yep. Peg first.
Yes, for my brother-in-law Kevin, who was the husband from my sister Patty died years ago, and he was just diagnosed with something I never heard of, was stage 8 cancer, so prostate cancer. So yeah, that's what our response was. So just keep him in your prayers.
So prayers for Peg's brother-in-law, Kevin, who was just diagnosed with stage 8 prostate cancer. I think it must be a mistype. Yes, Deirdre.
I have a prayer from Virginia. Some prayers for the Elmy Abbey family and for Muhammad in particular as he struggles with the tumor that they found in his chest and that is still being diagnosed.
So prayers, this was on my list too, for Muhammad Abdi. He is the eldest of the Abdi children, the family that we have been in relationship with for many years. And Muhammad was discovered to have a growth or tumor in his chest this week. He remains in the hospital, and no clear diagnosis has been made at this time. Anyone else? Yes, Kevin.
I just want to raise up Zeke and Kelly Brush Davison. The Kelly Brush ride, for the first time, I understand, is they've always had their rides here in Vermont, but they had one in San Francisco this past weekend, and it was kind of a big deal, and they're out there to help with that.
So prayers for Kelly and Zeke and the Kelly Brush Foundation. They have always had their rides here in Vermont, but they are doing one now in California. So that is where they are, and grandparents are here taking care of the girls. Anyone else? So I have a couple more prayers for Sandy Riggs and for the Webster family. This past week, Sandy had to put her beloved dog Lulu down, and that, as we all know, is just heartbreaking. So prayers for you, and prayers for John Lawless, who had surgery last Thursday on his back and is recovering. So let us pray. Dear God, what started as a quiet hum has become a crescendo in just a week. Thank you for the beauty of this land. In a time of debate, war, and a good measure of acrimony, you do your best to call us beyond bickering, fretting, beyond ballots, leading us to point fingers not at each other, but at your creation. You have done well at getting our attention. We're chagrined that it takes such a spectacular display to turn us from our worrying and complaining, to open our eyes and still our tongues. For those of us who are so preoccupied that we can't lift our heads to the hills with brains on fire, you have the leaves fall where we can't miss them, at our feet. So if we steal a moment and go for a short walk, or you lay a red carpet before us, you rejoice in our having come. You turn yourself inside out like the dog who welcomes us home. And when we're late for appointments and lessons and games and meetings, when we hang in endless construction and leaf peeper traffic, fingers drumming on the steering wheel and venom rising in our gorge, are you just getting us to slow down and see the trees in their fleeting splendor? Thank you for the lessons of the tourists who walk aghast at the glory that is our daily bread. We cannot run from the imbalance of the world, so help us, Holy One, to have the courage to cradle in trembling hands the plagues of war, famine, and terror with the ineffable wonder of your love. We ask your blessing on those among us who grieve losses, who strive to be well, who yearn for resolution and seek reconciliation. Amen.
We come to this time of offering. We follow prayer with prayer. Loving God, we thank you for enough time, enough resources, enough call, enough community, enough connection to be the church in this time, in this place. We ask that you bless us, that you bless our hands, that you bless our offerings given in so many ways, and take them and make them into love within us and flowing outward into the world. For we pray it in Christ's name. Amen.
When the waters are deep Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Okay. In chapter 23, verses 1 through 9 and 16 to 17, Job is in a very difficult time in his life. He has suffered greatly and has many reasons to complain to God about his suffering. The problem is that God seems to be missing. Let us listen together. Then Job answered, "Today also my complaint is bitter. His hand is heavy despite my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I might find God, that I might come even to God's dwelling. I would lay my case before God and fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn what God would answer me and understand what God would say to me. Would God contend with me in the greatness of God's power? No, but God would give heed to me. There the upright could reason with God, and I should be acquitted forever by my judge. If I go forward, God is not there, or backward, I cannot perceive God. On the left, God hides, and I cannot behold God. I turn to the right, but I cannot see God. God has made my heart faint. The Almighty has terrified me. If only I could vanish in darkness, and thick darkness would cover my face." May God bless this reading and our hearing.
So I've met a few people in my life who hear God speaking to them all the time. God wakes them up through a greeting from the chirp of a bird. God guides them into a sweet parking spot close to this entrance to the store. God whispers the correct aisle number in the grocery store when you just can't find the soy sauce. Some people hear God speaking to them all the time, but I feel I'm a little closer aligned with the great Barbara Brown Taylor, who wrote in her wildly important book back in 1998 titled When God is Silent. She said, most people don't come to me to talk to me about what God said to them last night. That the vast majority of people come to me because they can't get God to say anything at all. For some of us, a bird's chirp is just a bird's chirp. For some of us, parking lots are free-for-alls, and we've got to navigate the grocery stores all on our own, which is fine with me, because I think God has more important things to do than chatter to us constantly about the minutiae of daily existence. But God's distance and silence is a lot harder for me to take when I'm standing at a hospital bedside, or witness to some senseless tragedy, or standing in whatever dark valley I happen to be standing in. It's in those places and times when God's distance and silence mystify me and sting me and even offend me. So this morning, what I'd like to do is to take some time to wrestle with this very real human experience of the distance and silence of God. But first, let's pray. Amen. If anyone in human record had a right to be offended by the silence and distance of God, it was Job. The biblical book that carries his name is very clear right from the very beginning that Job was blameless and upright. He feared God. He was without sin. He did not do any evil. But Job found out that his being blameless and upright did not inoculate him from any kind of suffering. In chapter 1 of the book of Job, his property is destroyed, his children are killed. In chapter 2, he loses his health, and with just 2 chapters down and 40 whole chapters left to go, Job is already reduced to sitting on a pile of ashes with his head shaved in grief, wearing tattered robes. His well-meaning friends come to console him and to sit on the ashes with him, and in their conversations they assume that Job's suffering had something to do with his own sins, that he had done something to offend God, he had done something that was outside of God's design and will and plan for his life, and that's why Job was suffering. And Job rejects that, and he pushes back hard against it for the simple reason that it wasn't true. And so he stops talking with his friends, and he decides to bring his appeal directly to God. And this is what he says. Today my complaint is bitter. God's hand is heavy despite my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I might find God. I would lay my case before God and fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn what God would answer me and understand what God would say to me. So Job wants to take his arguments right to God, right? To believing that God would identify him as being blameless and upright, to affirm his arguments, acquit him of any wrongdoing, and restore him to wholeness. Job wants to go right to the source, right to God, but there's a problem, and it's a big problem, because God is nowhere to be found. Again from Job. If I go forward, God's not there, or backwards, I cannot perceive God. On the left, God hides, and I cannot behold God. I turn to the right, but I cannot see. but God knows the way that I take. When God has tested me, I shall come out like gold. Some people hear God speaking all the time, but Job didn't, and I don't, and maybe you don't either. And maybe the great hymn of our faith that we sang earlier in the service, maybe that resonates with you. Immortal, invisible, God only wise, in light inaccessible, hid from our eyes. Friends, from this very Jobian place of the distance and silence of God, I'm not going to offer you an all too easy spiritual to-do list today. I'm not going to say to you, come on, God isn't distant. You just got to bone up on your spirituality a little bit. You just got to enhance your powers of perception. I'm not going to say to you, no, God's not silent. You just need to worship more and pray more and meditate more and get out and serve more. Then you'll be one of those people who hears God speaking to them all the time. I promise I'm not going to say any of that to you today. But what I am going to offer you are permissions from Job and others in our tradition. Permissions for what to do when God is silent and distant for you. So the first permission from our tradition that I offer to you is that I give you permission to engage in the holy, sacred, and ancient ritual of siach, of complaint. I know we frown upon complaining, right? Complaining is annoying and exhausting, and no one likes a complainer. But I also know that sometimes life comes at us in a way that we just get all these emotions bottled up within us, right? That we just need to pop, that we just need to do what Job did so long ago and shout at the top of his lungs, God, today my complaint is bitter. I think that we have permission to pop like that, right? To just emote, to express, to shout into the ether, into all those around us, that all is not well, that we're not okay, that things are broken and not in place and not where they need to be. We just need to get that out there, as annoying and exhausting as that can be to those around us. So you have permission to complain. I think you also have permission not only to complain, but to argue with God. If complaining is an emotional release, a popping, a screaming into the ether, what's in your heart, arguing in the way that I'm thinking about it is more of an intellectual exercise, right? Doing what Job did, going right to the source, right to God, laying out arguments about why you think things are unjust or wrong, or you've been offended in some way, why you think things should be different, right? If arguing, and healthy arguing I'm talking about here, not the kind of argument that's meant to harm, but the kind of argument that's about relationship, right? The kind of argument where we frankly, honestly, if not always nicely, bring our arguments to one another and to God so that we can work through those, so that we can lay it out there, work through it, and arrive at a deeper, more profound relationship than we had before. I have permission to tell this story about my oldest son, Owen. We were a couple of years ago, 6 years ago, we were on a vacation in Los Angeles, and we had a wonderful argument. We were, it was beautiful, like July, California day, and we're walking to the La Brea tar pits to see the dinosaurs. I'd been wanting to go there since I was 5 years old. It was exciting. It was this beautiful day. But there had been some tension building up with my teenage son, and it just it came to a head that day. And I don't remember even exactly what the argument was about, but I just remember stopping in the middle of the street and shaking my bony finger at him and saying, Owen, the problem with you is that you think you know something still. And I know I don't know anything about anything. So we fumed for a couple of blocks, awkwardly walking towards La Brea, and then things eased up. And we kind of laughed at one another in the situation, and we began to talk things through. And it was just sort of a turning point in our relationship. We were talking about it again this last week and saying, that was one of the best arguments we ever had. We had another really great one in Quebec City, but I'll talk about that another time. So, a father and a teenage son arguing their way to a better relationship, which, if the book of Job is about anything, it's about that. Leslie, I think we have permission from our tradition to be silent in response to the God who is silent with us. I don't think that God's silence is a practical joke. I don't think it's meanness or sort of some hierarchical power trip or some sort of brinkspersonship. But I think that God's silence sometimes can be pedagogical, right? That God is teaching us with God's silence for us to be silent too. To just sit down on the ash heap for a while. To be there in long periods of silence with God, listening and hearing. Back to the great Barbara Brown Taylor, who this time invokes the great preacher Fred Craddock. She says it so wonderfully this way. The voice of God in Jesus is not a shout. In him, the revelation of God comes to us as a whisper. In order to catch it, we must hush, lean forward, and trust that what we hear is the voice of God. Making a similar point, scholar Thomas Edward Frank exclaims this: enough already. God is hiding, covered in darkness, waiting it out, waiting for us to be quiet. Some people hear God speaking all the time. But if you don't, I see you and I hear you and I feel you. And I give you permission from our tradition to complain as an emotional release, to argue towards a deeper and better relationship with God. And I give you permission to be silent in response to the God who's silent with you. I don't think that spiritual advice is going to make its way onto any greeting cards soon. It probably doesn't preach very well. But that's okay, because it might just be the permissions you need the next time you're sitting on the pile of ashes, head shaved in grief and wearing tattered robes. Grace and peace. I invite you to rise in body and spirit and sing 427. be seated. Just a few announcements to end our time today. Let you know that we have Coffee Fellowship next door, and we invite you to come over there and enjoy that with us. Tonight, between 5 and 8 p.m., Deirdre and Simon and I would love to invite you over to the parsonage for an open house. The parsonage is right next door. You can park over at the church and walk. I was going to say you could walk through the pathway, but there's a bear definitely in the area and interested in the garbage there. So maybe you want to walk on the road around. That's probably a good idea. You can also park. At the parsonage itself, and there's parking up there. If you need a spot at the parsonage, just 'cause it's harder for you to walk or any reason at all, just send me an email or call me, and we'll make sure that we have a space reserved for you. And we hope that many of you come. The cuisine is Mediterranean, broadly speaking. Lots of wonderful food. Bring nothing other than your lovely selves. We'd love to have you. Let's see. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to be taking a study week, and I'm going to be flying down to Raleigh to see Owen, maybe get into some good arguments with him. But he's got to work during the day, so I'll study during the day and then see him at night. And I will be back in the office a week from Monday. Susan and Hadley will be leading worship next week. Susan will be preaching, and they'll be around for pastoral care all week as well. The Social Justice Ministry would like to invite you to join them at the library at 7 p.m. on October 29th. This is for a rescheduled event with a woman named Susan Clark, who will be the educator and facilitator. It's a workshop about civil discourse, about how to have difficult conversations with people who are like you and who aren't like you. I know we don't need that in our culture, but we figured we would just try it anyway, and get some skills for conversing with one another across the aisle. I'll invite Marcia Bristow up in just a second to talk about our auction, but I'll let you know that on Sunday, November 3rd, we will celebrate All Saints Sunday, and as part of that, our tradition here is to invite you to submit the names of loved ones you know connected to you in some way who've died over the last year. You can fill out the insert in your bulletin and put it in the collection plate on your way out. You can also send an email to Kim in the office, and she will collect those names, and then we will name them out loud during our prayer time on November 3rd. Any questions about that, just come and talk to me. And with that, Marcia. Of course, yeah.
Okay, let's see. Have our joyful bidding information up there, part of it anyways. So, bear with me for a moment. I forgot my glasses today, so it's sort of like this. Kevin, I'm always in awe how you do your sermons from the hip. You're amazing. So you know what I feel this morning is vibrancy. Kevin and Deirdre, I don't know what you're feeding those trees, those beautiful maple trees in front of your house, but I think they are the most beautiful trees around. And it always seems that way, either. And the one in front of the church, always so beautiful. Anyways, vibrancy. The vibrancy of our congregation is always present. But somehow, right now, it feels like we are bubbling with opportunity to support each other and our amazing growing church community. So from Welcome and Outreach, from our ministry, thank you in advance for all your support that everyone does. As we all know, the stewardship program is underway and is certainly a way to share our support through a pledge. And Rich, thank you for your delivery of your experiences. You're a hard act to follow, both of you. Anyways, the online Joyful Bidding 2024 auction, previously known as Silent Auction Holy Nights. Does everyone remember Silent Auction Holy Nights? Is that ringing a bell? Is yet another opportunity to foster our thriving and growing community. It's a way to engage with each other, to get to know each other by sharing skills, experiences, and gifts, do a little holiday shopping, and to, of course, have fun in the process of bidding, socializing, and supporting. So funds raised through the auction will go to the general fund. I'm no expert on our financial ways, but the general fund is described by the church, is a place where any funds donated to the church reside. These funds are not restricted and may be used however the church leadership and or the congregation as a whole decide. So this coming Thursday in the Courier, I know you all rush to your inbox and your emails and open up the Courier to see what's going on. You will find a link in the Courier about the auction, and that will bring you to this website page. Although unfortunately, I don't think it shows it, but it will say register, it'll say auction, and it will say donate. So at your convenience, please go to the site. You can register early for the auction and take a peek at all the items that our generous members, friends, community businesses have donated. Even if you've registered for silent auction holy nights in the past, you will have to register again for this year's Joyful Bidding 2024 auction. There's items from past auctions still available. A few people were interested in the fruitcakes from last year. Those will be returning. And a number of other items, lots of fun new items to consider bidding on as well. So keep in mind that you can register early, but the actual bidding on the items will not open until 8 a.m. on November 3rd. And the bidding will stay open until 8 p.m. on November 10th. So you'll have a week to have fun, bidding, outbidding, little competition, little fun there. So again, we'll kick off the auction on November 3rd, and we're going to have a special festive Joyful Bidding 2024 Fellowship Sunday Brunch. Auction items will be streaming on the vestry screen, and everyone in attendance will have a chance to win one of 3 different themed baskets. There'll be one that's designated for children, one for teens, and one for an adult that will, well, I'm not going to tell you what will be in them, but it's just welcome and outreaches thanks to all of you. So once again, thank you from Welcome and Outreach, and we hope you will join us for brunch and the auction starting November 3rd. And you can boot me.
Thank you. No, thank you, Welcome and Outreach, and Marcia for all your work bringing us to this point. It's going to be fun. Thank you. Friends, with that, I invite you to stand. May God bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May God look upon you always with kindness and grant you peace. Amen.